Hi, today I'll be talking about Canon 10D. This is a 22-year-old camera. The point of this video is not how good the camera was or how technical it is accurate. This video will just give you an idea on whether you should buy this camera in 2026. To keep the review sensible, I use this with a Sigma 18-250 zoom because I felt that it will be deceptive to pair a camera which sells for around $20 to $30 with a lens which costs more than $1,000 and say that this is how the camera performs. If you want to pixel peep by zooming the image, this camera is not for you because it is a 6 megapixel sensor which is 22 years old. But if your question is whether the images taken using this camera look like a modern crop frame sensors, then the answer is partially yes. The look and feel of the images will be similar to what you will find in a modern camera because the projection of the image on the sensor will be similar. Then what exactly is the difference between a modern 24 megapixel or 30 megapixel crop frame sensor and this one? First is the ISO performance, colors. When you talk about ISO performance, this camera maxes out at 1600 ISO. You will miss quite a few shots if you're taking in extreme low light, which the modern cameras can manage to shoot. The colors are slightly on the warmer side and they are quite desaturated. But again, it's an older sensor. In fact, this will actually help you if you're trying to take some portraits because the desaturated and the warm image will actually make the person look good. But if you're trying to take some product photo or so with this camera, then there are high chances that you will fail. You may get this camera starting all the way from $15 up to $50. But the problem here is that you do not have service support. In fact, I felt this camera to be built better than the modern Canon DSLRs, the basic range. For example, Canon 1200, Canon 1300. The camera will feel really good in your hand. It is built robustly, it has got a top dial and the buttons are really good. After the build quality, let us talk about the functionality of this camera. First, this camera has got no live view. It shouldn't really matter to you because the autofocus in the live mode in the previous generation used to be a pain. It may make a difference if you're someone who uses vintage lenses or manual focus lenses because in live mode you could always zoom in to see if the focus was right. Apart from that, the lack of live mode shouldn't really make a lot of difference. One thing you need to keep in mind is that this camera has got no video recording option, which is understandable because it has got no live mode in the first place. Also, this camera has got only CF card slot. So if you're planning to take this camera to save money, you have to consider the cost of the CF cards. If the seller does not give you a CF card and the reader, the card and the card reader may end up costing you more than the camera itself. In my case, I got the camera without the card and I got this camera for $20. So this is something which you need to keep in mind. Now that we have spoken about the practical aspect, I'll be showing you a few image samples. Since I was traveling with this camera for 2 weeks, I do not have a lot of test images, but I would also like to say that looking at test images from this camera would make no sense because it is a 22 years old 6 megapixel sensor which has got pretty bad dynamic range if you compare it with modern sensors. But the perspective and the look and feel of an image which you get from a professional DSLR is always superior or different to what you would find in mobile cameras. So this camera will definitely replace your mobile if you want to take portraits or a couple of pictures which look and feel as if they are shot from a professional camera. The ISO creeps in at ISO 400 and it's very evident at ISO 800. And at 1600 it looks as if you added a grain filter to the image. But the images look pretty good compared to a noisy image from modern camera because in modern cameras, the cameras have inbuilt noise reduction and they process the image heavily to avoid noise. So in modern cameras, if you find noise, the images look pretty bad because that is the noise you find despite the camera trying hard to reduce noise. To keep the review a bit sensible, I have not compared the images from this camera to any other DSLR or mirrorless cameras because since this was one of the initial DSLRs launched, obviously any other DSLR which has come after it will give you better images. I felt that the better comparison to do would be to compare this with a mobile phone because the only question one would be asking is that if I already have a mobile phone, will it make sense for me to buy this DSLR which is quite old? And from my experience, I felt that yes, it does make sense. You might have seen a picture of me sitting on a log and both the images taken using the DSLR and the mobile camera. And just like me, you might have felt that the image taken using the camera looks better. It's not about the clarity or the dynamic range or the color science. What matters here is the perspective. Also, the reach which you get using this camera is far superior to what a mobile camera can provide. There are certain mobile cameras which come with additional tele lenses nowadays, but those lenses cost 10 to 15x of what this camera would cost you. Just to be clear, I'm talking about something like a moment lens or something like the lens which Vivo gives with their new phone X300. Apart from the additional controls which you get when you're using a dedicated camera like the aperture control, the zoom in zoom out functionality and the manual controls and raw files, having a dedicated camera is helpful because of the battery. In my experience, I have found that At times I've come back from a one-day trip without shooting anything because my mobile battery ran off. So considering all those things, practically it does make sense to buy a dedicated DSLR, especially when you're getting it for something like $30 or so. To sum it up, is this camera as good as modern DSLRs? No. Can you buy this camera to learn photography? Definitely yes. Does it make sense to buy this camera when you have a mobile phone? Yes. Just that you need to be aware of the limitations. Will you end up getting better photos than what you would have gotten if you had used only mobile camera? Yes. As I said, a lens with zoom feature will give you a better reach and better telecameras, and the perspective will be different and the photos will look better. And there are a lot of nitty-gritties here and there which I can't really explain. So you can buy the camera, use it for some time, and you will realize. Thank you for watching the video, and please do subscribe if you find the video useful.